Hello everyone. Welcome to Law Simple, Pure and to the Core. Dr. Vaishali here. Today's lecture is the continuation of lecture number 2, Natural Law School. So let us begin. During Renaissance period, social contract theory came in picture. A separate question might be asked in your question paper on social contract theory, or a question can be asked on natural law theory. So if there is a question on natural law theory or natural law school in jurisprudence, you have to explain it in all the four stages, that is ancient period, middle ages, renaissance and modern period. But if there is a question on social contract theory, you have to mention just the renaissance period, but you can refer that social contract is a part of natural law theory. During this period, focus got shifted from religion to natural rights. So earlier, during ancient period, focus of natural law theory was human reason or morality. During Middle Ages, the focus was on religion or divinity, or on, so major focus was on religion. During Renaissance period, that focus got shifted from natural law to natural rights. So rights came in picture. Revival of Greek and Roman thinking happened, not relying on religious scriptures but looked as the ultimate purpose of human life as a source of natural law principles. So separation of religion from law happened during this phase. Some hypothetical state of nature was considered as a pre-stage for the social contract. In that state, there was no government, no rules and no contract, and social contract naturally came. The concept of social contract was originated by Plato, but it was further expounded by political thinkers of 19th century, Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Rousseau. Social contract is a hypothetical construction of reason. It assumes that man in primitive society had neither the government nor any law. They lived in the natural state. Before beginning with social contract theory, we have to mention one more thinker in Renaissance period, that is Grotius. He provided that natural law is a product of human intellect and is independent of divine command. So he insisted that that natural law has nothing to do with divine command or that divinity of law, but it has to do with human intellect. It deals with human intellect, or it is a product of human intellect. Natural law cannot be changed by God himself. He termed human nature as grandmother, natural law as parent, and positive law as a child. One more philosopher, Pufendorf, also asserted supremacy of law of nature and not the supremacy of law of God. So during Renaissance period, that focus of natural law theory, which was on religion, was changed, and religion is separated from law during this point of time. Three major jurists are there in social contract theory: Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. We are going to study them, like how the state of nature was there for Hobbes, how it was for Rousseau, and how it was for John Locke. Then how that human nature was controlled, how social contract came in picture, and what was the effect of that contract. So at a state of nature, Hobbes writes that the life of primitive man was full of chaos, unhappy and unsettled. It was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish and short. So according to Hobbes, condition before social contract was not at all good, because human being, according to Hobbes, was a very selfish person and life was not good at all. He defined human nature as selfish, nasty, and needed to be controlled. So there were people who were fighting with each other, and that's why social contract came in picture. So how to control these people? So there was a need of ruler or monarch, and that's why people came together and they agreed that they will listen to a monarch. So social contract came naturally in a state of nature because it was a need. Once entered into social contract, people will live in peace without right, except right to self-defense. People are under control of monarch. So according to Thomas Hobbes, what happened? state of nature was a very bad type of situation, and it needed to be controlled, and that's why people came together. They agreed to be governed by a monarch. They surrendered all their rights to a monarch except right to self-defense, and that's how social contract came in picture. So social contract is nothing but a contract between people and people. According to John Locke, state of nature was a better thing as compared to Hobbes. Locke was of the opinion that there was no threat to the life, but there was no security to property. Non-chaotic but understanding of humanity with three natural rights was essential. And which are those rights? Right to life, right to liberty, and right to property. So according to Locke, it was a good state of affairs, but there was no security. So some people are bad in society. So according to John Locke, everything was great, but in order to get some security, people came together. So how they were controlled? People would elect a government in a democratic way. According to him, human nature is rational and reasonable. Given a choice, they can control their behavior. And what was the effect of Locke's social contract? Three natural rights enforced through government, which is formed as a result of social consent or social contract. So people came together, they elected a government in a democratic way, and by doing that, they got their three rights assured, and they were right to life, right to liberty, and right to property. Now coming to Rousseau, his state of nature was a better thing. He says freedom, happiness, equality, and liberty existed in primitive societies. It was utopian and peaceful. So how to control? People are sovereign. They are going to vote on every matter. They are good, compassionate, but there is a possibility of corruption. So what was the effect of Rousseau's contract? Life will be fair for everyone if people follow general will and set aside personal preferences. So this is the social contract theory. A clear example of social contract theory is John Locke was inspired by Thomas Hobbes, and Thomas Jefferson was inspired by John Locke, and ultimately he expanded the idea of John Locke's natural rights, which resulted in Declaration of Independence in United States, which has a very deep impact on fundamental rights in the Indian Constitution. Now let us study natural law theory or natural law school in modern period. In spite of the differences relating to the background of the theory, that is the social contract theory, there are many commonalities, means common things among all three philosophers. They argued men entered into an agreement known as pactum unionis for the protection of their lives and property. This contract gave birth to society. Thereafter, men entered into a second agreement known as pactum subjectionis, by which people undertook to obey an authority and surrendered the whole or part of their freedom and rights and the authority of the government. So in social contract theory, for everybody, state of nature was different, but a common thing is that two contracts happened. By first contract, people came together and formed a society, and by second contract, they came together and surrendered their authority or a part of their freedom to government. So two contracts happened, one between people, and second between people and government. So by this so social contract theory is the next stage in the development of natural law theory, and by social contract theory, natural rights came in picture. Last phase of development of natural law theory began with industrialization, which was fueled by advancement in science. As the spiritual needs of individuals are overpowered by material needs, the church conceded powers to the monarch. So what happened initially, it was a law of nature or just a morality. Then religion came in picture. Then natural rights came in picture. By that way, religion and law got separated. And during modern period, church conceded powers to the monarch or to the government. This paved way to concentration of powers in the hands of the sovereign. Therefore, in 16th and 17th and 18th century, natural law theory remained less forceful because of the impact of sovereign or ruler. However, for the various reasons, towards the end of 19th century, natural law theories regained importance. The revived theory substantially differed in certain aspects. Now the natural law is relative and non-abstract and is value-loaded, value-oriented and value-conscious and not unchangeable. It is changing and varying, not permanent and everlasting. Therefore, it is rightly called as natural law with a variable content. Now understand, lots of students do not understand this concept, natural law with a variable content. It simply means that earlier natural law, which was unchangeable, which was universal, was changed. An element of change was inserted by modern period in natural law, and it is called as natural law with variable content. It means now law can change as per the social needs. While mentioning modern period, you have to mention certain jurists. One amongst them is Rudolf Stammler. According to him, there is no single rule of law whose positive content can be fixed a priori. So you cannot fix a law, single law for like centuries. It will change as per the need. The law of nature means to him a just law, and a just law is that which harmonizes the purposes within the framework of social life, and such harmony varies according to time and place. So laws must be variable on their content to meet these varied needs of society. So a simple example, earlier slavery was a law. Now that is not a law because opinions changed, society developed, and that's why new law came in picture. And that variable content is very essential to make the law just and fair law. So in order to maintain a law as just and fair law, it has to be changing as per the changing social needs. According to Joseph Kohler, mankind constantly progresses in culture in the sense that permanent cultural values are produced, and since culture is growing variable, the law is growing and is dynamically variable. So according to him, when culture changes, law changes. Earlier in lots of countries, bigamy was the law, or bigamy was a rule. Now that rule is changed. In lots of the countries, child marriage was allowed, but now it is banned. So many countries banned homosexuality. Now it is allowed and it is legalized. So law is growing and is dynamically variable, and that's how law becomes just and fair. Law is not an automatic product, for new values have constantly to be created according to the need of civilization. Then comes John Rawls in picture. I would like to take a separate lecture on John Rawls because he is a very important philosopher in jurisprudence. But right now we'll refer John Rawls in the context of natural law theory. He laid down two basic principles of justice which the state should satisfy to ensure justice to its people, which are: first, each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive basic liberty compatible with a similar liberty of others. So it is all about equality and liberty. And second, social and economic inequalities are to be arranged so whatever social and economic inequalities are there in society, they must be arranged that they are to be of the greatest benefit to the least advantaged member of society. So reservation for some people or some classes comes here. So in order to bring equality, certain degree of inequality is necessary. Offices and positions must be open to everyone under conditions of fair equality of opportunity. So this is all about equality, and then certain type of reservation to certain people in order to bring equality only. John Finnis, the next natural lawyer, his sophisticated theory of natural law. Theory of natural law claims to be able to identify the conditions and principles of right-mindedness, of good and proper order among men in individual conduct. He viewed justice and moral authority of law is the most important concept in natural law. According to him, natural law consists of two sets of principles: basic values, those are good for human beings, example knowledge, aesthetic experience, sociability, practical reasonableness, and religion. 2. Basic requirements of practical reasonableness are the authority, justice, moral authority, and rule of law. In his Natural Law and Natural Rights, Finis accepts the rule emanates from the eternal law and is self-evident based on experience and reflection. So according to him, both the sets of principles, basic values and basic requirements, must be respected by a sound legal system. Now next thing, what is the contribution of natural law? Lots of students think that jurisprudence is an outdated subject. What is the use of jurisprudence? What is the practical utility of jurisprudence? Now let us understand. We'll understand it in the context of natural law right now, because the lecture is on natural law school. This theory or school played an important role in the creation of an international law by giving the doctrine of pacta sunt servanda, that all the countries must mutually respect treaties in between them. So bindingness of that treaties came from natural law. Second, natural law led to the formulation of fundamental and human rights. Example, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Natural law theory led to the abolition of slavery laws because it provides for equality. Principle of equity were developed on natural law thinking. The branches of law such as trust, equity, and quasi-contract are the results of natural law thinking. The development of administrative law was also influenced by natural law thinking, like the principles of audi alteram partem, both the sides must be heard, and nemo judex in sua causa, no one can be judged in his own cause, that is the doctrine of bias. These principles came from natural law school. Principles of good faith, test, justice, equity, and good conscience, they all came from the domain of natural law school. Legal reforms, it is used as a yardstick for examining the existing law and reforming. So natural law school is not outdated, it is still there in major legal systems of the world and it is still working. To conclude or to sum up, remember certain common characteristics of this school of thought. Every human being has an idea of what is right and wrong, or what is just and what is fair. What is right or just is the higher law, or which is also called as morality. The higher law is discoverable by reason or by human reason. So you can provide that in this theory. 4 major phases were there. And during first phase, focus was on nature or morality and reason. During the second stage, that focus was on religion. The religion became paramount to reason. During third stage, during social contract phase, natural rights were the main focus, and during modern period, that variable content became a matter of focus. Variable content means law should be changing. So earlier focus was on reason, then it became religion, then it became natural right, and during last stage, that variable content, that changing nature of law, that capacity to change became an ingredient which can make a law just and fair. So that's it for today's lecture. Please combine both my lectures and write a very good note in your answer sheet. Goodbye and good luck.